Once again, Eric travels into the icy wasteland. He begins his journey, a vast plain of white lies before him. He flew into Fairbanks 2 days ago and has been driving north since, switching to snowshoes where the roads become suggestions. He's made this journey annually for around 30 years now. It's done more out of necessity than anything else. Spending his Christmas trekking through thousands of miles of snow is not his ideal vacation. The cold gets into places the human body shouldn't have to deal with. Behind the knees, deep in the jaw, somewhere under the shoulder blades. After all this time, he still can't fully prepare for it. He's bought better gear over the years, better boots, better layers, a better pack. It doesn't matter. The cold finds a way. This journey was his birthright. He was born to make it, and he will most likely die making it. As long as he can remember, he's been told he was born to do great things, mostly by his father. Eric remembers his father as a stern and stoic man. His father was a man of few words. He had always believed that only those who had nothing to say talked longer than necessary. A man who has anything to say tries to keep his observations brief and to the point. He once told Eric that most conversations were just noise people made because silence made them uncomfortable. Eric didn't understand that as a child. He does now. Since he was a child, his father had been absent on Christmas Day. Christmas was mostly celebrated with his mother's side of the family, the only side of the family that Eric knew. Most of his father's side of the family was either dead or in hiding, for good reason too. His mother never asked about it. She was the kind of woman who knew which questions not to ask. Eric used to resent his father for the absences. Every Christmas Eve he'd go to bed with that same hollow feeling, the one that sat in his chest like a stone. He stopped resenting him eventually. He understands now. Understanding it doesn't make the memories sting any less. It just makes them quieter. There is one Christmas that Eric will always remember. When Eric was a young man, returned from a long tour of duty in the military, his father sat him down and told him the truth about himself. Eric had done 2 tours by then. He'd been in places that changed the way a man looked at the world, and not in any way that improved it. He came back quieter, harder. His mother said he reminded her of his father when he first came home. He hadn't known whether to take that as a warning or a compliment. This had been the longest conversation that he ever had with his father. His father had a glass of whiskey that he barely touched. He set it on the table between them and left it there the whole time, like a prop he'd forgotten to use. His father told him the truth about the beast. His father's voice still comes back to him word for word, even now, out here in the white. I know this will be hard for you to understand. I mean, hell, I still can't believe it myself. But our family has been keeping a secret for hundreds of years now. It started with your great-great-great-grandfather. His name was Alexander. I don't know much about the man before he came to Alaska. The only thing I really know about him was that he was born somewhere in Vladivostok. Most of what I know about him comes from his journal, which has been passed down in our family for generations. The journal is written in Russian, and over the years it's been translated badly and then retranslated, so some things are probably wrong. But the important things, the parts that matter, they come through clear enough. He came to Alaska and ended up in charge of a group of settlers there. The group traveled farther north looking for somewhere to settle. The winters were hell, but they managed to survive. After a few months, their numbers began to dwindle. Their supplies were scarce. If they were to survive the winter, they needed more food. Alexander gathered all the men of the settlement and set out to hunt. Along the way they found some game, but not enough to survive on. They kept hunting, hoping they could find something to keep themselves and their family alive. After a while, the men began to grow weak and tired. Morale was worse than the cold. Men stopped talking to each other. Arguments broke out over nothing. Hunger does that to people. It strips everything back to the animal underneath. In the middle of the night, about half of the hunters had left the camp. They had taken what little food they had left with them. The tundra started getting to the rest of the men. Some of them would wake in the middle of the night, screaming as if they'd seen a ghost. One night they heard more screaming, but when they got up they realized that it wasn't them. They followed the direction of the screaming until they ended up at a cave. I'll try to spare the gruesome details, but they found the deserters dead. When they got there, it was dead silent. The only thing they could hear was the howl of the wind. That is, until they heard the screaming again. This time it was coming from inside the cave. The men went deeper into the cave, hoping to find some sign that any of them were alive. Sure, they had abandoned them, but they were family. They were friends, people they'd known for years. Alexander couldn't just leave them to die. Inside those dark caves they found something. They found something that's haunted our family for generations. I don't know what it is. I have no idea why it does what it does, but I know one thing for sure. I know that if that thing is left unchecked, we'd all be dead. There's never been a formal name for it. My father called it the beast. Eric is still walking when the memory releases him. The cold snaps back in like it was waiting. His bones ache and the cold is becoming unbearable. Just a little while longer, he thought. He needs to do something to pass the time. If the cold doesn't kill him, the boredom will. He's gotten good at the waiting part. The walking, the nothing. When he was younger, it drove him half mad. The silence out here. Now he understands why his father never spoke much. Some places train you into quiet. Eric thinks about what's to come. He stops for a moment to rest. He sets his bag down and rolls his neck until something pops. His left knee has been giving him trouble since last year. The doctor told him it was the kind of wear that builds up over time, the kind you can't undo, only manage. He didn't tell the doctor what he'd been doing to earn it. The chill of the winter air stings his nostrils. Eric reaches behind him and grabs his bag. He opens it up and pulls out a locked wooden box. The box is old. The corners are worn down to bare wood and the latch is starting to rust. His father kept it in better shape. Eric reaches into his pocket and pulls out the key, then inserts it into the keyhole. Inside the box, there's something wrapped in purple cloth. The cloth is the cleanest thing on him right now. He keeps it clean out of habit, or maybe out of respect. He's not sure which anymore. He unwraps it, revealing the icy dagger inside. He wraps his fingers around the handle. The blade shimmers in the sunlight. It doesn't look like much. If you didn't know what it was, you'd wonder what the fuss was about. It's not a beautiful weapon. It's not ornate. It just works. And there's nothing else in the world like it. This was his inheritance. This was his birthright. His father's voice again, picking up where it left off. They went deeper into the cave. Alexander eventually found what was left of their supplies, completely untouched. He thought that the men must have come here to get away from the blizzard. Deeper in the cave they went. The stench coming from deep within the cave was becoming more pronounced. It was the smell of something wet and old, like the bottom of a lake. The screaming had stopped a while ago. The only sound now was the sound of snow being crushed under their boots. The men finally stopped at the body of one of the deserters. From the looks of it, he was recently dead. The face was butchered beyond recognition. They found a knife on his body. They had no clue what it was made of, but as far as they knew, nobody from their settlement owned this blade. The handle was wrapped in something dark and dried. The blade itself looked almost translucent in the low light, pale like old ice. It didn't look like it had been made by any hand Alexander recognized. He took it anyway. There was another trail of blood near the remains, but no body. It looked like it went further into the cave. The men started to question if this was a good idea. Two of them wanted to go back. Alexander let them. He didn't argue, didn't shame them. He just watched them leave and then kept walking. He didn't know then what he was walking towards. The journal makes that clear. He thought it was an animal. He almost hoped it was, because an animal was something a man could understand. Alexandra reassured the rest that it must be a wolf or bear looking for food. Either way, potentially it would serve as a good meal. The men hadn't eaten in days. The supplies that they found at the entrance of the cave weren't enough to survive on. This was their only hope of survival. Ironically, the only way for them to survive was to put themselves in danger. The deeper they went, the worse things got. Bones were littered along the twisting caverns. There was something in this cave that didn't want them there. Some of the bones were shattered like glass. They thought this had to be a bear. Nothing else could have done this. Nothing is strong enough to have done this. They were wrong. The men heard rumbling from deeper in the cave. They'd come too far. It knew they were there now. Bullets did nothing to it. Nothing could pierce the beast's thick hide. One of the men emptied his rifle, and the thing didn't slow down. It moved through them like they were furniture. Eventually, all his crew was dead, and he was out of bullets. The beast came lumbering towards him, ready to kill Alexander. In desperation, he stabbed it with the blade he found at the entrance of the cave. It worked. The monster stumbled back, and he was able to get a glimpse of it. The beast looked almost like a man, but distorted in the worst way imaginable. It was covered from head to toe in thick white fur and had a prominent scar over its right eye. Alexander charged at the beast, stabbing it again and again. It ended up being a tough fight, but in the end he won. The man hobbled back to the settlement with a broken leg and 3 broken ribs. He barely survived the night. He eventually recovered, but it wasn't over. The next year, around Christmas, Alexander once again woke up to screaming. He got dressed, grabbed his gun, and even the knife that had saved his life all those months ago. The beast was alive. He knew it was the same beast he had killed last year. He knew it because of the scar over its right eye. The settlement was wiped out that night. Alexander, his family, and a few others were the only ones who survived. But once again, the beast was dead. This time he was sure. They moved to a neighboring settlement, hoping to put it behind them. But once again, around Christmas, the beast destroyed the settlement. Alexander was haunted by the idea that death and destruction would follow him wherever he went. Each year, it got harder to kill. The same amount of wounds that had killed it the last year barely bothered it the next. It was learning. That's what the journal says. Alexander wrote that word specifically. Learning. He didn't know what to make of it, and neither does Eric. Alexander decided that the only way to ensure his family and friends' safety was to find how it had come back to life. The previous 2 years, he had burned its body in hopes it would not come back. That year, he even spread the ashes in different locations so that he could be sure it would never return. He concluded that there could only be one place where it could be. He made the journey to the cave that year, the first journey our family has made. Sure enough, the beast was there, and once again he killed it. He trained his son to take up his mantle when he was gone, and his son did the same with his son. And now it's come to you. Son, this may be hard for you to understand, but I'm dying. I've been diagnosed with cancer. The doctor's telling me I only have a few years to live. I've tried to prepare you to take up my mantle without getting you too involved. I know my father ruined my life with his training. I wanted you to have a life, son. I wanted you to have something that I never could have. A choice. Please, I hope you can understand why I'm telling you this. Lately, I've been growing weaker. If I make the journey this year, I won't return. I need you to do this, Eric. This year, I need you to kill the beast. Eric remembers not saying anything for a long time after his father finished speaking. He remembers the sound of the house settling. He remembers looking at that untouched glass of whiskey and thinking that it was a strange thing to pour a drink and never take a sip. He remembers his father looking older in that moment than he had ever looked before, like the telling of it had cost him something. Eric asked him one question. He asked if it ever got easier. His father looked at him for a moment, then looked away. That was answer enough. His father died 14 months later. Pancreatic cancer. Fast and ugly the way it usually goes. Eric was at his bedside. His father didn't say anything in the end. He just looked at him, the way he always looked at him, like he was trying to pass something across the room without speaking. Eric thinks he understood what it was. He's not sure he wanted it. He keeps walking. Somewhere behind him, Sharon is wrapping gifts he won't be there to open. Things haven't been going so well for Eric lately. Unfortunately, he learned from his doctor that he's infertile. In a family where lineage is held in such high regard, this was troubling for him. He sat in his car in the parking lot of the clinic for a long time after that appointment. He didn't cry. Hey guys, sorry to interrupt real quick. I just wanted to let you know you can head over to my Spotify and give me a follow. I'll be backlogging all my previous stories and series there, so you can listen to everything in one place. And if you want early access to videos, my music, and the chance to chat with me directly, go check out my Patreon and become a member. Thank you all so much. And now, let's get back to the story. He just sat there with the engine off until he got cold enough to turn it on. The thought that kept circling back was not about himself. It was about the hunt. It was about what happens when there's nobody left to do it. He lost his job as well. It was supposedly about the company needing better assets or something along those lines. He doesn't hate his boss or the company. It's just that these trips to Alaska each year don't pay for themselves. Missing work around the holidays, coming back with injuries he couldn't explain. It was always going to catch up with him. This year he even had to take out a loan to make the trip. He doesn't want to bring a child into his life in such a dark time, so adoption is out of the question for the moment. The thing that's troubling him the most is the idea that he'll leave this world without a successor. Last year, he almost died. The beast was too strong for him. He remembers the metallic taste of blood pooling in his mouth. He remembers the searing pain of his broken wrist. He even remembers the concussed haze he was in for the remainder of the fight. He barely made it out of there alive. His wounds have healed, but Eric is not so sure of himself. There are mornings where he catches himself thinking about what would happen if he just didn't go, just stayed home, stayed in bed. Let Christmas be Christmas for once. Then he thinks about the settlement. He thinks about what the journal described. He gets out of bed. He thinks about Sharon, too. He met her at a bar, of all places, 2 years before he took up the hunt. She was there with friends, and he was there alone, which was a habit he'd picked up from his father without realizing it. She sat down next to him and asked him if he was always this serious-looking or if it was a special occasion. He told her it was just his face. She laughed like that was the funniest thing she'd ever heard. He fell for her right there. She isn't without faults. None of us are. But she just makes everything worthwhile. She'd stopped asking detailed questions about the trips years ago. She knew enough. She knew he came back hurt sometimes. She knew he always came back changed in some way, like something had been sanded off of him. She never made it harder than it already was. They've been married for about 5 years now. He still remembers the look on her face when he proposed to her. Sadly, his father didn't attend his wedding. By then, his father was dying. By then, the hunt had already become Eric's. He misses her so much right now it's almost physical. He tucks it away and keeps moving. Eric stopped and dropped his bag. He was at the cave. The nearest town was about 9 miles south, a small cluster of buildings and maybe 200 people who had no idea what lived this close to them. He'd stopped there last night. Got a room at the only motel, showered for the first time in 3 days, ate whatever the diner was serving. The woman at the counter had asked him what brought him out this way at Christmas. He told her he was visiting family. She smiled and said that was real nice. He smiled back and said it was. At the entrance of the cave, there was a stick that he had left from the previous year. He'd almost forgotten about it. He was glad it was still there. Eric grabbed the stick and some duct tape from his bag. He then proceeded to wrap the duct tape around the hilt of the knife, making a makeshift spear. It wasn't pretty. His father would have hated it. He also pulled something else from his bag. C4. It was hard to get, but he needed a backup plan in case he failed. He got it from one of his war buddies. When his friend asked him why he needed it, Eric grinned and simply said that he was going hunting. He didn't push it. Good man. Eric placed the C4 near the entrance of the cave, tucking it into a crevice in the rock face where it wouldn't shift. His plan was to seal them both inside if the beast got the upper hand. He knew that it might not stop the monster, but it was worth a shot. The nerves were starting to get to him again. The first year he made the journey, he stood in front of the cave, not moving for almost 20 minutes. He wasn't a coward. It's just that only an idiot wouldn't be afraid of this thing. He's had to wake up every morning in a cold sweat, remembering that thing's face as it was getting ready to maul him to death. The image doesn't dull with time. If anything, it gets sharper. He has a routine now before he goes in. He checks his laces. He checks the detonator. He rolls his shoulders back. He says Sharon's name out loud, just once, just to himself, just so the last voice he hears before this thing starts isn't the wind. Then he goes. Eric took a deep breath and grasped his spear. Walking into the cave, he began to pass the bones. He never got used to the sight of them. He'd tried to figure out over the years what animals they came from. Most of them he couldn't identify. Some of them he could, and those were worse. The lonesome path in front of him almost called to him. It beckoned him deeper into the cave. He didn't want to go deeper. He thought of everything that was waiting for him back home, but it was his duty. He was torn between two things. He wanted to pass the quest on to someone else, make it someone else's burden to bear. He just wanted a normal life, a quiet life. His family had warned him about the repercussions of telling anyone about his trips. They couldn't take the risk of this thing being kept alive or experimented on. It needed to die. He'd thought about what would happen if the government found out about it. He'd thought about it more than once. He always came to the same conclusion. It needed to die. The rumbling came from within the cave. Despite the cold, Eric began to sweat under his coat. Each step brought him closer to the inevitable. He felt the cold steel of his revolver on his hip. The gun wasn't for the beast. The gun was for him. He had decided that he'd rather end himself quickly than be mauled to death by that monster. He grew closer to the monster. He could feel it growing closer. He eventually reached the end of the cave. He turned on his flashlight to see a pool of water, but the beast wasn't there. That's impossible, he thought. He wasn't late. The beast couldn't have escaped. Even if it did, he would have seen it on his way to the cave or even when he had arrived at the nearby town. It didn't make any sense. Was the beast gone for good? He stood there longer than he should have, flashlight sweeping the walls, the ceiling, the far edge of the pool. Nothing. The cave was just a cave. For one brief moment he let himself think it. He let himself believe it was over, that this was the year it ended, that he could go home and tell Sharon he was done and mean it. That moment lasted about 4 seconds. Just then he heard a rumbling. The water started to splash along the rocks of the cave. Something was moving under the water. A shape began to form below the surface. It was almost as if it was growing in size. Finally, bubbles rose to the surface. Before he knew it, the beast rose up from the water. It crawled out screaming in pain. The monster staggered once it got onto its feet. Looking up into the light, it covered its face, adjusting. Eric caught a glimpse of the scar over its right eye. Same one. Always the same one. 30 years, and the scar never changes. He doesn't know what that means. He stopped trying to figure it out. It then began to slowly walk towards Eric, grunting along the way. Eric stood frozen for a moment. He wasn't expecting this. The beast was picking up speed. In a few moments it was almost in a full sprint. Eric prepared his spear and got ready to defend himself. The beast came charging towards him. He stabbed it in the shoulder, but it kept going. It pushed itself further into the spear. The beast grabbed Eric with its free hand and threw him against the wall. Eric blacked out for a second, quickly waking himself up. He stood on his feet in a haze when he felt the burning sensation in his thumb. It was broken. Luckily, it wasn't his dominant hand. He took stock of himself the way his military training had taught him to. A quick scan from the ground up. What works? What doesn't? What can be ignored for now? The thumb was bad, but manageable. His shoulder was singing from where the wall had caught him. He'd live, assuming he got out. He began to run towards the entrance of the cave. Running to get the spear would be suicide, and his gun was useless anyways. He messed up. There was nothing to do but run. The beast was clearly faster than Eric, almost catching up to him in a matter of minutes. But Eric trained for this. He picked up more speed as the haze wore off. Each stride grew larger and he began to move faster. He had to think quickly or he was dead. The only thing he could think of would be to blow up the entrance of the cave, but the beast was too close for him to detonate it at a safe distance. If he wanted to survive, he would have to take a risk. He was getting close to the entrance of the cave when he heard the beast behind him. It was closing the distance between them. It was coming for him. He pulled out the detonator from his pocket. He was almost at the entrance now. If he blew it too early, he'd be trapped in the cave with the beast or the rubble would crush him. If he blew it too late, the beast would escape. His timing had to be perfect, or he'd be dead. Just as he thought this, he tripped over something. Eric fell onto the ground, only to see the beast lumbering behind him. He got a glimpse of the beast's face. There was something he hadn't expected on the beast's face. Confusion. It was like the look on the face of a lost child, scared and afraid. Eric had seen that look before, the first time he'd ever killed a man overseas. He'd carried that look around with him for years. He wasn't sure what to do with it now. He got back onto his feet, just barely dodging the beast. Eric picked up speed once again, this time gaining a substantial lead on the beast. He approached the entrance of the cave, glancing behind him quickly to see the beast getting closer. As Eric reached the entrance of the cave, he detonated the C4. The blast propelled Eric forward. The haze came back, this time accompanied by a deafening ringing. The rocks crumbled on top of the beast. As far as he knew, it was dead. Even if it wasn't, it definitely wasn't strong enough to push those rocks off him. The dagger was gone, though. The one thing that could kill the beast was gone. Eric sat in the snow and wondered what would happen next year. He wondered what would happen to the next town, the next settlement, if the beast clawed its way out in 12 months and he had nothing to meet it with. He didn't have an answer for that. He thought about Alexander. He thought about a man who had walked out of a cave with broken bones and kept going, who spent the rest of his life making sure the people around him didn't pay for something he'd stumbled into. Eric wasn't sure if that made Alexander a hero or just a man who got trapped. Maybe it was the same thing. The unwelcome cold greeted him once again. He just wanted to get away from it all. Eric stood up, reaching into his bag. He pulled out his carton of cigarettes, picking out the one closest to the front. He held it up, shaking from the nerves, and lit it. He took a deep breath and started the long journey home.